All right.
Hey, Andrew.
Yo, what's up, Eliseo?
Nothing much. Just drinking coffee, writing. Same
Writing,
old.
writing, writing. Working on
Mm-hmm.
that dissertation still.
Yep. Yep.
All right,
You want to talk about
man.
it?
I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna let
All
you.
right.
I'll give you a break this week. I'm not gonna make you talk about it.
I appreciate that. That's the last thing you want to ask. I think you've said this before already. The last thing you want to ask a PhD student is, "How's the thesis going?"
That's the first thing I want to
Those,
ask. I like to
those
see
are
the response,
those are
but
fighting words.
I know that's like the last thing you want to
Yep.
hear.
Yeah. You'll know when it's done.
All right.
You'll know what is done. Yep.
All right, let's do this. So, welcome everybody. Thank you all for coming back to another episode of Custom Journeys. So, today we're just going to interview Eliseo Iglesias for part two, round two, hearing about his personal story and kind of how he got to be one of the co hosts on this Custom Journeys podcast. So, again, Eliseo Iglesias, I know you're glad to be here, but thanks again for joining me and welcome back.
Good to be back. I'm happy we both have the time to really space out these episodes here. But I think we're getting a lot of good background information, a lot of good detail on a career, a particular career in STEM. I think it's pretty insightful.
Yep. I agree. I definitely agree. So let's go ahead and jump into it, man. I want to hear about. We kind of did a sneak peek last time or a preview how you ended up working. You eventually ended up working back at KIPP High School or KIPP. Was it high school, right?
Yeah, in high school. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's pick up there. So after you left Cincinnati, you moved back to Houston. Did you immediately start working at KIPP, or what kind of happened from there?
So again, this was another example of how networking can work to your favor. It's really interesting. As soon as I submitted my application to withdraw from the University of Cincinnati, I received an email from a monthly email newsletter from KIPP, from the KIPP alumni coordinator. There were openings for hiring, and they were particular about hiring alumni from KIPP that were available to work at a high school. At this point, they were targeting alumni in STEM to tutor or to teach assist educators in a particular high school in Houston. This initiative hired a bunch of alumni. I naturally said, "What? Let me, if I'm going to move back to my mom's house, let me make sure I have something in my hands I can pay rent with." Because I definitely felt like I was telling you, I was feeling down, felt like a little bit of failure. So it's like the dog walking back with its tail between its legs.
Yeah.
That's how I felt coming back to Houston. But at the very least, I thought I can go ahead and start applying for a temporary job. I could be a TA, no problem. The plan was to do that job and apply to graduate schools in Texas exclusively. I thought that would give me a better shot at trying again. I definitely had a chip on my shoulder
Mm-hmm.
at UC because I thought, after reflecting on it, I thought, what, I just jumped into a situation I knew nothing about. And this time, I know what questions to ask. I know what to look for to set me up for success. Yeah. So, but you want me to go into how I went to teaching in high school?
Yeah. Now I
Okay.
want to hear all the details. Like,
Okay.
so I mean, I think it's good that number one, it's good that you shared that experience because number one, yeah, things don't always work out how we wanted to.
Yeah.
Like you knew from the beginning, yo, I want to be a scientist. So that means along the way you learned I gotta go to grad school, right? You tried grad school, didn't work out, dropped out or withdrew. But that wasn't the end of the story. You're like, okay, let me, go back to my corner, get cleaned up, and then
Yep.
get ready for round two. So I mean, I'm glad to hear that was kind of your mindset throughout this entire process that you
Mm.
were ready to persevere regardless of what was thrown at you.
Yeah. I would be remiss to not to mention again. I'm very blessed and fortunate to have a family willing to back me up in this journey. I know not everyone has families that have that type of support, and even my family, we don't come from wealth, but they're willing to say, "Hey, you screwed up. It's fine. Come back home, and there's always a room for you here."
Yeah.
So that's one thing that's always been meaningful to me from my parents is that they've told me, whatever you decide to do, just know you always have a room in this house, no
Sure.
matter what happens. So that's a source of strength that supports me.
What was the best and the worst part about being a teacher in that time period? Well, first, how long were you a teacher?
I was a teacher for one semester.
One semester. Okay. What was the best and the worst part of being a teacher during that time frame?
I'll start with the worst. So
All right.
the worst part of it is unclear guidelines on how to handle specific students, in particular special ed,
Yeah.
and classroom management. Because when you're teaching, especially high school students, you have to understand that you have to manage different personalities and also be flexible with different learning types. Some students are more tactile learners, some are book learners, etc. You have to be able to speak in their language. That was what I had the most trouble issue with, is that coming fresh out of college, I'm used to learning from the slideshow, from a lecture show, right? Lecture slideshow, sorry. But the students, they have a attention span of about 15 to 20 minutes. So that was the hardest part for me, is going from college type learning to how kids learn. At first, I was teaching as if it was a lecture in college. The problem with that style is that some people have, learning disabilities, have learning issues, ADHD, ADD, etc. So the way I was teaching them wasn't suitable for their needs. I had to change very quickly in a short amount of time. The best part of that, where, like I said, the few moments where I felt as though they understood what I was trying to convey. I'll give you one quick anecdote, and this is a shout out to my sister. I was trying to teach a conjugation, and they kept failing my quizzes. My sister told me, she said something very insightful. She now works at a school now, at a KIPP school, but she told me that make it fun for them, or actually first make it fun for yourself. Because if you're bored, if you don't exude enthusiasm, they're not going to be enthusiastic about what you're talking about. So make it fun. I remember that one night I stayed up way too late. It was a school night, and I constructed a rap for a particular conjugation. I'm not gonna
add some bars. Let me hear something.
I'm not gonna lay down bars to.
Was that Daddy Yankee?
I have to look at my lyric sheet. It's been a minute, but it was the corniest stuff you ever heard. But what? It was the one conjugation they got right.
Hey, did you turn on music too? Like you had like music playing, or you just kind of?
I made my own beat with my hands and my.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's dope. I like it. That's cool, man.
I had to step out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
In order to, but I felt like I grew a little bit by doing that. My sister, she was like, "Yeah, I told you."
Is your sister younger than you?
She's older. I'm the youngest. Yeah, I have two older sisters. That's one of the better parts. Also, really quickly, with KIPP, I got a chance to be a chaperone on a camping trip towards the end of the semester over the summer. Since I was an instructor there, I got to go for free, but I had to be a chaperone for students. But taking students that, come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds to the woods or to national parks is a very neat experience. That was also another, I would say, definitely a plus thing working as a teacher. But yeah, so small moments like that, it's few and far between, but it's the best feeling.
Gotcha. No, I love that. I've had some experience as a tutor, and I think part of the reason why I love tutoring so much is because, like, when you see the light bulb come on, the kid's like, oh, like when they get it, that's like a fulfilling moment, right? It's like lightning in a bottle, and you try to capture that each time you can. And shout out to your sister. That's some really good advice. I can't recall a time where I sat in a class and I heard a teacher speaking monotone like this, and I got excited about whatever. So I think that having that enthusiasm and trying to approach or trying to meet people where they are with their different learning styles, I think that's really important. A lot of times in college, you don't get that. It's like, yo, this is how I'm gonna teach the class. If you get it, great. If you don't, come see me in office hours. But it's not necessarily gonna be like, okay, now we'll try something more visual. You don't always get that. There's certain professors who know that they have to like meet people where they're at, but not every professor kind of takes that extra step.
Give me some time. I'll remember that rap song. I'll lay down the bars later.
Yeah, do that. I want to hear that, man. That's got to be fire. Spanish is hard. I remember Spanish 1 was like really easy. It was like count to 10. And then like we got to Spanish 2, it was like sentence structures, and it just got way more advanced. And I think I would have been one of those kids in your class like, ¿qué? Like yeah. Can you say that again? So you were a teacher for a semester. And so during that time point, around when did you kind of identify what school you were going to apply to for grad school?
Right. I focused on in-state schools. I applied to UTSA. I applied to UT Dallas. And I applied to Rice.
Okay. This is the
Um,
third time.
yep.
Okay.
There's a theme here.
Mm.
Pretty much, Rice was a no go. UTD accepted me, and as well as UTSA. But UTSA gave me the best offer as far as scholarships. It was through that Valero scholarship you mentioned last time. Now, I don't know if you got this, but I got a phone call from the department at UTSA, the mechanical engineering department, from Shirley.
Yeah.
I'm sure you remember her. Pretty much, I got the announcement. I got a letter in the mail. I remember this moment because I shared this with my mom. I got a letter in the mail with the offer from Valero. It was like a 10K grant
Yeah.
for like a year or 2 years.
Hmm.
And I literally cried. I cried in front of my mother. I was like, hey, here's my second chance. Here's my second chance. And then she told me, well, there you go. She's like, thank God. You made it. It's okay. You have a second chance now. Go.
Oh man, that's good.
Yeah. So I think I still have it somewhere in here. UTSA, they sent me like
Official letter.
an official letter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a folder, and it was all nice and stuff. So yeah, it was a nice moment to me. It reminded me that I'm worth it. I'm worthy to be here.
So you ended up going to UTSA or getting accepted to UTD. Ended up going to UTSA because they had the bread, they had the money, and after that scene with your mom, man, that's like a movie scene. So of course you can't turn them down after that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
things
Oh,
worked out.
on the letter it did say you're invited to work with Dr. Millwater. So his name was specifically placed there.
That was my next question, right? So it's like your first go around, you realize, hey, you need funding to do this. You need an advisor. This go around, so they just completely identified Millwater? Like you didn't have to, you didn't know who he was at all until that letter?
No, I had no idea who he was.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe it was either they assigned a temporary advisor to me because they
Yeah.
always assign you a temporary advisor when you go to school. It's just the question is whether or not they have a project for you to work on and funding to pay you.
Yeah.
They said that he would be my temporary advisor, but in that phone call, it was kind of understood that he would be my primary advisor to work on research that he's doing. Learning from my lesson in Cincinnati, I said, okay, let me do my due diligence before I jump in.
Mhm.
I remember I said, I'm going to ask my friend, our friends that live in San Antonio, Trinity alums, friends of mine, can I sleep on your couch while I go which I didn't think of at the time, interview the chair of the Department of Mechanical Engineering.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, I had the fortitude. What's it called? I had me atreví. That means I went for it, interviewing the chair of the department because and you see, I was knocking on everyone's door. I was knocking on the provost's door. I was knocking
Gotcha.
on the vice president's door, like by survival, because I was looking for funding. So that taught me a
Hmm.
lesson. It shook away some of the fear I had reaching out to some of these people. It's their job. They work in a university. It's their job to answer questions from students, to address issues concerning students. That's part of their job. Don't be scared to ask. The
Yeah.
worst they can say is no, like leave me alone. Okay. So anyway, literally at UC, I forgot to mention this. At UC, I asked the chair of the Department of Air, is there funding available for a student like me? And she literally said no. And then I thought to myself, why am I here then? She told me, and this kind of goes into that theme about for people of color. She literally told me maybe there are scholarships that are related to your ethnicity that can help you. She literally said that. And I'm like, I need to get out of here. This is
Yeah.
so that's what I'm telling you. Sometimes these things are used very cynically. So that was another reason I left Cincinnati. But anyway, so that prompted me to talk to the chair of the department / my advisor and ask him questions about why he wants me there. Right.
Hmm.
So I went up to him and I dressed up. I wear my, tie and my, nice khakis and my shirt buttoned down. And I had a conversation with him. I remember I talked to Shirley. I remember walking in and saying, hey, can I schedule an interview or can I schedule a meeting with Dr. Millwater? And so she said, no problem. So I'll keep the conversation short. So essentially, the question came down to this when I talked to him. Why are you interested in a student like me? And he told me, because you are a Trinity student. I need someone with your skills in my lab. That's something we are lacking. I know Trinity is well known for producing well-rounded students that are good writers. And I need a student like that in my lab. And I'm like, okay, sounds pretty legit. Like the fact that he had a thought out reason gave me confidence.
Yeah. No, that's great.
Yeah. So that's why I would encourage students that are going through that, go for it. Don't be scared. Go talk to the chair of the department. Go ask them who has funding in the department, who's interested in hiring students. It's their job to seek out opportunities for students. So don't be scared to ask those questions. And also don't be scared to say no, because that's the worst they can tell you is no. So that's something I definitely, so that's one thing I learned that I took away from that helped me out in this period of my career. And also I would add, don't be resentful. I might sound resentful from my experience at UC, but if I met that chairperson again, I would probably say, hey, how you doing? I hope your career is going well. Sorry it didn't work out. We always have to be, unfortunately, as people of color, always have to be kind of stronger. So that the perceptions that are there for people of color aren't reinforced. You know?
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a really good point. Because yeah, man, I think a lot of times we battle with. We can kind of talk here for a minute. I think.
I'm sorry, I went on a tangent there, but
that's fine, man. Because I think a lot of times we do, and I know from talking to you, and I talk to my wife and friends about this type of stuff, but it's like let's look at, I'll use an example of like tipping at a restaurant, right? So it's like, yo, stereotypically they're like, oh, black people won't tip me good or whatever. So I know like subconsciously when I go to a restaurant, I'm tipping like the best I can, because it's like, yo, I don't want you to have like, I don't want to reinforce a negative stereotype that I know isn't true, but it's like, hey, somebody who only watches certain outlets, certain news outlets or whatever, or they don't interact with Black or brown people on a daily basis, they may have a negative stereotype in their mind that may be reality to them. So it's like, hey, you never know like what backgrounds people come from. So a lot of times there is that battle a little bit of like trying to dispel negative stereotypes that we have to battle with. Sometimes I'm like, man, I don't care what they think. I'm not going to do X, Y, and Z or whatever. But like even stuff like going to the store, also like certain stores, right? Like where you're like, oh, I don't want to be followed around in this store. So it's like you walk in and try and be like extra friendly and like, hey, how you doing? But it's like, we shouldn't have to battle those stereotypes. But at the same time, 100% understand where you're coming from, where it's like, you had a bad experience with somebody. Sometimes you got to be the bigger person because you don't want to be known as the, oh man, this guy was the, or like my wife, for example, is, or black women in general. Sometimes it's like, oh, you had a bad experience with somebody. You got to make sure like you're the bigger person and nice still regardless, because you don't want to have that negative stereotype of like the angry black woman. So it's a real thing.
Yep. Especially, I mean, and it's crazy, especially when the anger is merited. Being upset in a particular situation is merited. So yeah. But yeah, man, where was I? Yeah. So UTSA. Go ahead.
Yeah. No. So I was just gonna say. So yeah, you met with Dr. Millwater. That's interesting and that's good. I think people should know like why they're bringing somebody in, right? Like you should know why you want somebody to be in your lab. Hopefully you have some kind of idea or project in mind that you want them to pursue. And if Eliseo's and Dr. Millwater, if their mindsets are in agreement and this is the project you want to pursue, then that should work out perfectly. So after you met him, what was the next step from there? Did you sign on? Did you walk down to the lab and meet some of the lab people? What did you do next?
I think, I'm sorry, my memory's a little fuzzy here, but I think I went down to the lab with him. I don't know if you remember that day.
Yeah, I do. That's why I brought that up.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Like I'm brain farting. I'm pretty sure he gave me a tour of the lab. Yeah. So you could confirm whether or not if I was wearing a tie.
I feel like you were. I feel like I've seen you in a tie. Like I feel like I saw you in a tie that day.
Okay.
Oh, cause we didn't wear ties often, so it's like, yo, why is this kid dressed up? And like, what's going on? But yeah.
I remember walking through. He had a big lab. The lab, it's a computation lab, so it's like more of an office space, right? But yeah, I think I met you. I might have met Daniel, Laura. I forget who else was there. Joe and Kayla. I don't know, Kayla was there maybe, and yourself, of course. But yeah, oh yeah, sorry, spoiler alert. So yeah, Andrew and I worked in the same lab.
If you didn't know, that's kind of how this thing started.
That's how we met. We met at the same lab working for Dr. Millwater, doing computational reliability. And we'll spend a whole nother episode talking about that. So he it's like, nah, not interesting. The kiddos.
They don't want to hear about that.
They want to hear about that. No, that's true. He showed me the computational lab. And the fact that there was a lab with multiple people there gave me hope. Knowing that there would be funding gave me a lot more encouragement. It wasn't until that I started working there and developing relationships with everybody that I learned how important it is to have a positive lab working environment. I think that really lends to the success for you, for me, for everyone else there that was there. Having that camaraderie really helps. And having multiple levels, you had, at that time, we had Daniel and Laura, and then you had Joe and Carolina, right? They were kind of PhD students. You had us, and then you had, I think, Kayla and a couple other undergraduates working there.
Yep.
So you had all different levels, and I think you can like learn from each other a little bit more effectively. I know I leaned on Joe and Carolina a lot during my master's degree. But yeah, no, so yeah, seeing that lab, having funding, and an advisor that wants you, working on an interesting project, I think those are the reasons why I decided to go ahead and commit.
Again, you brought up some good points. Having funding is critical. And then also that team, like including the supervisor, it's like, hey, it's one thing to be just the only student in a lab, but it's another thing to actually have a good team to kind of play, to build with and to work with. It's not life isn't an individual sport. Academic or research or whatever you do in life doesn't have to be an individual sport. And it's a lot better and a lot more fun when it's a team sport. And I think that's something that I had to learn, because I was so used to like, hey, do your homework, turn it in on your own. But then when you get to college, it's kind of different. It's like, it's more of a collaborative effort, especially in research. So I think that keep that in mind, be open and willing to work with others and support yourself with a good group of individuals. So I'm glad that you came to the lab, ended up working out in the long run. We got a chance to take some trips, some conference trips together, win some awards together. Now we're here doing a podcast together. So that's pretty dope. Things worked out. But yeah, man. So, I mean, you came to the lab, we got a chance to work together. What was your overall experience kind of with the master's degree, or the process of getting a master's degree? How was that experience overall to you? And what would you kind of recommend for other people who are considering doing a master's degree in STEM?
I came in knowing that I'm going to go for a PhD, so an academic career. Okay. For many people, they approach the master's degree as a ways to get promoted within their own company.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the time, those degree plans are non-thesis optioned. So you don't necessarily have to present a thesis to a committee and then submit a book to the graduate school, right? You just have to do a special project. So it depends on what you want to do with the master's degree. Either people use it as a stepping stone to do a PhD, or to get certified in a software, or to learn a particular skill that's going to help them get promoted within their own company. So there's really two avenues there with the master's degree. I would say to students, first figure out what you want to do, or think of what you want to do, whether that's industry or academia, and then see how that master's degree fits in there. Because sometimes some students go straight to PhD. I went to a master's degree because I wanted to get my feet wet first before I threw myself into the PhD. Because like I told you, I felt very unaware and uninformed about these processes. So I thought the master's degree was a good stepping stone. Now, one thing to keep in mind, I was, again, fortunate and blessed that I had an advisor that was willing to pay for my education for just a master's degree. Sometimes advisors look at these funding opportunities as investments. So they want to invest in a student at times that will stay longer in their lab and do more work for them. Not all advisors are like this, but sometimes they'll only accept students that are straight to PhD, because they know they'll stick around for at least 4 to 5 years.
Gotcha.
Okay? So just something else to keep in mind as you're exploring academic options. So that's another good question to ask your advisor. Are you willing to fund a master's degree? Or are there other avenues? Because I think what helped me, the Valero Scholarship, that helped a lot of us back in those days to fund our education. So yeah, that's just the one thing I wanted to add there.
No, there's some Valero employees somewhere that are like appreciating the shout out. Yeah. But no, I think that's all good advice, because I mean, you got to kind of start with the end in mind, right? And if you kind of have a good idea of where you're trying to go, then you can kind of reverse engineer it, or everybody's situation is slightly different, but you can kind of look at how other people did it and kind of think of, okay, I can do something similar if I want to get to this end goal of being like professor one day, or if I want to go to industry or whatever. So I think that's all really, really good advice.
The end goal can change.
It does change for a lot of people.
And I'm putting that out there right now as I'm talking about my life experience. It has changed.
Yeah, so that's all true. Definitely true. So yeah, you start your PhD after 2 years of a master's degree. How did that play out? Let's just start there. So you graduate with a master's degree. What are you thinking? What's next? And where do you end up going for your PhD?
At that point, I Was, again, fortunate to work with an advisor that encouraged their students to pursue summer activities, in particular internships. You went to Sandia, and I went to 2 summers in a row. I went to Army Research Lab in Maryland, Aberdeen, Maryland, or sorry, Aberdeen Proving Grounds, Maryland. There, I was able to apply some of the concepts I learned during my master's degree. So that was really cool. And I worked with a former collaborator of my advisors. So that's where that networking comes into play. So my advisor, he knew, Dr. Millwater knew a former collaborator working there that was looking to hire student interns to help with this research at our ARL. So I applied for that. I got it. I worked with a research mentor 2 summers in a row. And then after the second summer, they were so happy with what I was doing. They said, would you like to work here full time for about a year? You can do like a yearly contract. So I said, yeah, let's do it. Working at ARL was a really good experience there. I worked for the Vehicle Technology Directorate. And essentially, I did fatigue tests on aluminum structures, doing in situ monitoring. I won't go into detail, but it was fun. Actually, spending summers there were probably one of the most fun experiences in my life, if I'm being honest.
That sounds like it. I mean, you're doing something interesting. You're making money for once. You're not making just grad school money.
Yep.
And then summertime, right? So you're probably around other college kids and being able to spend the money that you're making. So sounds good.
Yeah. After working there, I bought my first car.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's a Corolla, but hey.
Nah, Corolla, Toyota is good, man.
I was thinking longevity more than style.
That's what I'm saying, man. Reliability.
Exactly.
Reliability.
I'm sorry. It wasn't a GM car. I'm sorry.
I ain't gonna blame you.
I took my time, and again, I went through the same process. I applied to Rice.
Oh boy.
I applied to Arizona State. I applied to UTSA, and I think I applied to UT Dallas again. And again, UTSA offered me the best deal, and I got a phone call from the professor that wanted to hire me.
Okay.
And again, to me, that stood out above everyone else. Everyone else I had to reach out to give them a call. And to their credit, I'm sorry, Vanderbilt. I applied to Vanderbilt.
Okay.
And I was able to talk to professors at Rice, Vandy, and Arizona State, as well as UTSA. I don't think I got a hold of anyone at UTD. But Rice, I spoke to a professor there that was interested. However, he did tell me that funding was very competitive, and he was only really allowed to hire one student. He told me that he had already a student in mind from El Paso, from UTEP, that he wanted to hire. He was interested in hiring a Latino student, but he said unfortunately he didn't have enough money to hire two. So there are some limitations with Rice. Rice is a private school, so tuition's higher. So they have to be very judicious with their decision. I'm just glad I got a conversation with a man. So that was a good thing. Arizona State, I spoke with the professor and their students, and the project was just not something that was interesting to me. UTSA, I was able to speak to the professor there, and he was a young professor, told me that he's going to work with me through however long it takes for me to graduate. He pitched me this way. He said, I will be very available to you as a young professor. I won't just go to conferences all the time. I'll actually give you attention. And that is a problem sometimes. I've heard that from other PhD students saying that the professor was MIA a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. It is a problem sometimes. And so anyway, so he gave me a lot of good things to think about. And again, UTSA in-state tuition, relatively cheap. And so any funding money would go a long way there. The funding was there to pay for me to go to school there. So at the end of the day, I did go ahead and pick UTSA for my PhD.
Okay.
In mechanical engineering. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. And so real quick, because you brought it up again, how you got a chance to reach out and speak to some of the different faculty members and research members on the different campuses at Rice, Arizona State, and Vanderbilt. So how real quick, so in case somebody else is going through this process, what are you typically doing? Are you just kind of typing rice.edu, going through like the mechanical engineering department, looking at the directory and then making a phone call? Are you just cold calling people, sending emails, or what do you typically do?
Okay, so you can cold call. I think I did do that for Arizona State. And this is where, again, networking's key, because you definitely, cold calling's fine, but if you can do directed targeting, I think that's better. So fortunately, I met someone that's in the our academic network, friends with Daniel. Daniel has friends everywhere. And so, sorry, Daniel, for those that don't know, Daniel is also worked in the same lab we did, me and Andrew did at UTSA, but he was a PhD student. So I called Daniel. I said, hey, do you know anyone that's a student at Vandy? He told me, oh, yeah, so-and-so is a student at Vandy. Why don't you call them? And so that's what I did. So I called the student and asked him, give me the 411 on Vandy and your experience there. And so I got a lot of good information from that. As a matter of fact, she worked with one of the professors I wanted to work with. So she gave me some enlightening information. Let's see. So that was very helpful. At Rice, I cold called or I cold emailed. But again, I have to look up the email. But when you email these professors, you really want to emphasize that you are a student interested in their research and be mindful of specifying what type of research they're doing. Because you can't just tell them, hey, I want to go to graduate school. You need to butter them up a little bit. You need to tell them, hey, I see you're working on reliability. I'm interested in what you're doing with that. And I read this paper and blah, 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 blah. I'm interested, you know. Are there any opportunities for me to work with you as a student? There is a right way and a wrong way of doing cold calls. The right way requires doing your due diligence on the professor you want to work with, knowing what their focus is, knowing what publications they have. Google.scholar.com is a friend. So that's how I did it. I did cold call, but I tried to do directed targeting to ensure that I would elicit at least a response. Arizona State, I wasn't able to talk to the professor over the phone, but I was able to talk to their students over the phone. Okay, so don't be afraid to ask these questions. Don't be afraid to say, hey, can I talk to your students? Yeah. What projects are you working on? Don't be afraid to ask these questions. And to give a little bit due credit to the difficulty, I did not know what questions to ask until after my experience at Cincinnati. It was after that I knew I needed to ask the students, what was your experience working there? What projects are you working on? Do you have funding? I did not know those were the questions to ask. So that experience helped me. I think in the long run, even though it was a failure, I learned something.
Yeah. And that, I mean, that's all you can do, right? Each experience is a learning experience. It's not even a failure, right? It's just things didn't work out the way you wanted them to, but you still learn something from the experience. And that's a really great point to doing your due diligence. Make sure you do your homework before you start reaching out to people. You don't want to just start going down a directory list and then get a phone number, call somebody randomly, say, hey, I want to do grad school. Who are you and what do you research? If you're going to call somebody, you better know, like, what do they research? Maybe look at the titles at least, or maybe the abstract or some papers that they publish. And that's just in all walks of life. Even if you're trying to reach out and just get a job from somebody and say, hey, I saw you, look up somebody on LinkedIn and say, hey, I saw you were the manager of a product development group working on some new product at Microsoft or whatever. And say, oh, I think this is going to be some revolutionary technology. I would love to talk to you more about it. Exactly. So do your due diligence. Like you said, butter them up a little bit. I think people love to talk about themselves if you give them the opportunity. So yeah, make sure you do some more research on your part and then ask the right questions.
One more thing I want to add. Sometimes it doesn't work out. When I talked to the Vanderbilt professor, we had a good conversation. He was very frank and honest. And even though you might not like the answers, but you learn something. You do learn something from these conversations, even though they're not the responses they elicit aren't of your liking. So for example, I was talking to a Vanderbilt professor about working with them, and they asked me, what are you working on? What was your master's degree on? And so I explained in detail what I worked on. And they literally asked me how, I'm not sure how that helps me in my lab. And I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
See you later. Bye, Felicia. So it didn't work out. And I'm glad they told me the truth, so I don't waste my time like I did at UC. Right? So even though the conversations are negative, even if you have a professor that's cranky or racist or sexist or etc., you want to know that up front. You want to know that up front and not learn that in the middle of your program. So the more you can initiate these conversations and get to know these professors, the better. Because keep in mind, not only are the professor is your advisor, but they're also your boss, your funding source. They have a lot of control over your life. So you want to make sure that the person you're entrusting an important part of your life is going to be responsible and going to treat you right. So
Yeah.
you want it to be a positive relationship. So the more, and so that's why I really emphasize gather intel from students working from professors. Gather that intel to make a more informed decision.
My closing thoughts on this was some of the best advice I got from career advice I got from somebody was from my first manager at GM. And he told me, hey, if you ever find yourself working for or underneath a bad manager, get away from them as soon as possible. And like the people that you work with and for are going to be some of the biggest catalysts for you in your career. So if you're just working for a bad manager that's not putting you in a position to succeed, get away from them. So I mean, I think you had the perfect mindset starting off, like trying to identify, hey, who's going to be a good manager, who's going to be a good resource for me to use. And my second comment about the professor from Vandy, I don't really get. So I guess it's two approaches. One approach is like, hey, you found a master's student that applied for a position. You're looking for somebody, for a master's student who's already done research in that exact field. I think another approach, that first approach doesn't require you to really train anybody, right? You just bring them in, plug them in, hit play, and they should be able to run, basically continuing what they did for the master's degree. The second approach, which I prefer, employers, I'll just say employers, I think it's a general problem, is like some people just don't want to train people, right?
Yep.
It's like, hey, you're putting an entry level job out there that's requiring 5 years of experience, or you're looking for somebody that has XYZ experience. But I think a lot of times you just need to look at, hey, what is this master's degree? Eliseo has a master's degree in mechanical engineering. He did Monte Carlo or reliability or whatever for his research area. What does that tell me about him? So meaning like, hey, if he's able to pick this up, I don't think he'll have any issues picking up this new topic research. He already has a master's degree, so he understands what's the process of grad school. Now he'll just have to take additional classes, additional research, read additional material to get more familiarized with what we do. But you prove that you have the mental capacity and capability of learning the material. So I think if your interest is there, whether it's a job or academia, I think employers should be looking at, hey, the interest is there, the passion is there,
Exactly.
and they have a piece of paper, a degree, a piece of paper that says, hey, they can learn new things. So that to me is the perfect recipe versus like, hey, I just want this one student to come in that's already done this in their previous experience. They've already done the same thing. I just want somebody else like that. I don't want to spend the time to train and whatever. So that's my complaint, my gripe that I have with a lot of different like job openings, I'll say, just in my previous experience. But yeah.
Completely agree. And that's
Yeah.
been my experience at UC, at Vanderbilt. It's everywhere. You have to discern good advisors from bad. It's a challenge.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm telling you, take your time. You don't have to rush into it. Okay? Doing a PhD it's almost vocational. You're not doing it just for the money. I certainly did not. You're dedicating years of your life to a very difficult career track. You want to make sure that you're going to be in a healthy position, healthy environment, because you don't want to be dealing with the normal struggles of a PhD student on top of dealing with a bad or poor funding.
So I guess I'll kind of open the floor up to you to kind of tell me just in general about your PhD experience and how it compared to your master's experience.
I think it was just a harder version of it. So hold on, I can put it a different way, a little bit better. So a master's degree, a thesis track, you are trying to solve a problem that's already there. And that's essentially what I did for our former advisor. Is they were developing the software. I won't go into detail, and there was an aspect of it they wanted to fix, and it has to do with reliability. And I was working with Joe, and they asked me, can you solve this problem? We're having this issue here with our sensitivity analysis. Let's see if you can come up with a solution. With a PhD, you're looking for a problem to solve, but you're also formulating the problem at the same time. You have to think of a novel idea to explore. So PhD students are the ones that generate knowledge. Master students are really, for the most part, their exceptions are applying knowledge or improving on already knowledge that's there. But PhD students in general, they're doing work that is trying to find new frontiers, new avenues. So that way it's a lot more challenging. It requires a lot more independent thinking, a lot more on-the-fly learning than a master's degree. And that's one of the reasons it takes years to complete. So I think that's one of the bigger differences, I would say, between a master's and a PhD. But master's is a good preview. It's a good preview of a PhD. You do have to write a thesis.
What was your experience like with your second or your advisor for your PhD as opposed to your master's? Primarily because of the experience difference, right?
Okay.
Your master's advisor, he had a lot more experience. He had funding, a history of funding, strong history of funding, versus your second advisor, who was a newer professor. How was that experience?
The benefits from working with a advisor that's already well established is that they are stable, right? They have a steady source of funding. They have a good idea of how to train you. We talked about that. You're going to school, right? So you're supposed to get training. And so that's a pro, okay? A con is you're kind of subject to whatever they are envisioning for you to do. So with someone like him, he has a vision of what he wants to do already in that lab. And so there's not as much leeway to explore new ideas, although he will give you an interesting problem to work on, no doubt. With a newer junior faculty member, and sometimes the established faculty members, they have grown their lab and they have many mouths to feed, and so they might not be able to give as much attention to you as they could as a smaller lab. To credit to Dr. Millwater, I think he did a great job giving everybody their due attention, but not everyone's like that. Not all faculties are built the same, right? So that's one possible con for having an established faculty member, is that they might be working with a larger lab and not have enough time to dedicate to advising you and guiding you through your PhD track. Now, with the junior faculty member, the pro is they have the time to work with you, but the con is they are subject to funding issues. Usually, junior faculty members are given startup money, which lasts for about 2-3 years. But after that, most PhD tracks take about 4 to 5, 6 years to finish. And so at the very beginning, junior faculty members are kind of in a rush to bring in funding. And so while they do have more time to dedicate to you, their focus in collaborating with you is to bring in more funding. Okay? Now, this isn't the same in every institution. Some institutions that I'm aware of have a 2-year waiting period for junior faculty where they're not allowed to take on students until they have somewhat established themselves. So in my situation, my junior faculty member, he's very good, brilliant guy, but as a junior faculty member, they are often looking to get promoted and to get more funding sources, more instrumentation available to them. And so my faculty member, my advisor, got a job at Texas A&M. Okay? And that was after the 3rd year. So sometimes the con from working with a junior faculty member is that you're subject to possible funding issues. Thankfully, I never had that. But also number 2, they might be subject to moving for a promotion or for a better job position. So that's the con of working with someone like that, which is possible. I mean, I'm doing that right now. So I'm still working with that faculty member. It's just we're working remotely now, but we made it work. And I'm very fortunate to be working with someone that's willing to continue working with me despite the remote working. We were doing remote working before COVID. I'll just put it that way. But we built that relationship over the 2-3 years working together at UTSA. So I think that went a long way in building that trust. There are instances where advisors will abandon students.
That's crazy.
Or students are unable to join their advisor. My advisor was very willing. I told him straight up, look, I worked here for 3 years. I'm come to a point where I don't want to start over. If I go to A&M, I'm going to have to start over, redo coursework, redo my research. I don't want to do that. Let me finish here. And he said, okay, no, if you're in, I'm in. And so again, it's one of those conversations is awkward, but you have to have, right? And again, I learned that in Cincinnati. You have to have those awkward conversations or else you're going to be wasting your time. And so in that moment, we both agreed we're going to stick to it. We're going to see this thing through and we're going to make it work. Now, after that, making it work has been a labor of love. I'll put it that way. Not having a supervising faculty member at an institution back you up requires you to fill out your own paperwork, advocate for yourself, and knowing very well the bureaucratic process behind the scenes. Because all of a sudden, all the purchase orders, all the logistical things you have to handle directly with, the department and school. Whereas usually a faculty member would be the intermediate step there, improving everything. And so there was a lot put on my plate because of that. But I was willing to do that because how close I was to finishing, and also how willing my advisor was to working with me to continuing. And at the end of the day, he's an A&M professor. Having an A&M professor on my committee looks great.
Yeah.
Okay. It's always a good idea to have at least one outside member on your thesis committee. It looks good. So I had no qualms with that. I think I was a one-man lab, put it another way. I was a one-man lab. And so because of that, I definitely felt a little bit unstable. At that point, I finished all my courses, so I didn't have to pay too much for tuition. However, not having a faculty member there to advocate for me made it difficult to get funding to pay for my tuition and also to pay for rent. That's when the opportunity at Trinity
Yeah.
Trinity came up. There was an opening for an adjunct faculty position at Trinity. And fortunately, again, this is where networking is really helpful. I made it a point to once a year, ever since I left Trinity, once a year send an email to my academic advisor at Trinity or former academic advisor and say, hey, how's it going? This is what I'm working on. Hope you're doing all right. Just to check up on things and letting them know that I'm still right. I got in the habit of doing that once a year. And that year, I guess 3 years ago, I did that. He emailed me back, hey, are you still a PhD student at UTSA? And I said, yeah. It's like, okay, you might be interested in this adjunct position just opened up. I encourage you to apply. I think you'd be a good fit. And I'm like, hell yeah. I'm like, yes, of course. I'd be happy to apply. So I did. I got an interview. And I got it. And I've been working here for 3 years. And it's been great. And again, I've been a one-man lab. On top of that, I've been teaching on the side, right? So I got a lot of payment. When you're a PhD student, you'll find it. We're hustling. We have to survive. Especially, I would say, all domestic students that are PhD students, more than not, they're probably side hustling to make ends meet.
Nice.
Yep.
Man, that's awesome. No, you're emailing. I like the idea or the method of like making sure you're reaching out to people every so often. That's something I can do better at. But I will say, like, in my own experience, even just taking like mental notes of like, hey, what milestones do people have coming up? Like, if somebody's getting married, like, oh, just reach out, say congrats, I heard you're getting married. Somebody's having a baby, oh, congratulations on the baby. And I'll say one thing though, like when I was in Detroit working at GM, I was deciding, hey, am I going to stay at GM and do a different job or go back to Houston? And I had decided to email this lady who worked at GM in a different department who I knew was pregnant, but I figured, hey, she probably had her baby by now. So I reached out, said, I just thought about you and you probably had your baby. Congrats. And she like sent me back a picture of the baby. Then like 2 weeks later, she's like, yo, you want to come work at a PPO? It's a different department. She was like, hey, you want to come work in this other department? And I was like, she was like, we have a couple of job openings I think you might be good for. And mind you, I met this lady probably two or three times. Like she gave me a tour of her department. And other than that, I just followed up with her, reached out to her a couple of times. But I mean, you never know like how those emails, those cold calls, just touching base with people that you met previously while networking will go a long way. And also, man, I think I love your story of perseverance. That's kind of one of the biggest things that comes to mind hearing you talk about your journey. And I think with the challenges that you had, they've just presented new opportunities for you to grow and expand. So, I mean, you graduating, you've already walked, but I mean, when you're done, like the amount of experience that you have being a visiting lecturer or an adjunct faculty member, teaching, doing independent research, like legit independent research, all these experiences that you've had, I think it shows like, hey, when you're determined to do something, you'll do whatever it takes to get it done. And I think that's a characteristic that people are going to look for. It's a valuable characteristic to have. I think somebody's going to be very fortunate to bring you on board. So hopefully NASA's listening and they'll have you working on a rover or something soon.
I want to connect it back to my experience as a person of color. I talked about it last time, going to a mostly white school, private school, and then the Trinity, which is kind of not white, but affluent.
Yeah.
But going to UTSA and then going to ARL, I got to meet a lot of people of color in STEM.
Nice.
And that's partial the reason I decided to go for it. because I saw a lot of people that looked like me, that looked like you, that were making it. And I was like, if they can do it, I can do it. In Millwater's lab, you had Daniel, Carolina, you had everybody there was a person of color, almost everybody there. And so I can't underestimate how much that, looking back, how much that supported me and inspired me, being surrounded in that environment. Being able to talk with Joe and his mom in Corpus, he would tell me, hey, call your mom. I'm sure he would tell you that. But being in that environment is very encouraging. It tells you that we're just as qualified, just as capable to be in the spaces as anyone else. In ARL in Maryland, my mentor was a Taiwanese American. My other mentor was African American. And being around those folks was inspiring to me and informed me that, hey, I can do this shit too. These guys and girls are pushing through it. I can do that too. Yeah. So I can't stress enough having that representation, seeing that happening in real time. It matters.
It does. That's big, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for saying that. So I loved hearing your story. I loved hearing part 2. I know it's just the beginning. A couple of questions before we go. Number 1, what's next in your eyes? Or I know NASA is something that you kind of dream of. Is that kind of where we're striving to achieve?
So right now, my immediate thought is just finish writing. Yeah. But I would like to stay in academia and be a professor, because I definitely like teaching. It's probably one of the more enjoyable portions of academia, if I'm being honest. If I did research, I'm not sure. I honestly, I'd like to work at a place like Trinity, where it's more teaching focused and research is a smaller percentage of your workload. I think I would like to be in a situation like that. Now, that being said, having the opportunity to work for NASA or for a national lab, that will be a hard thing to say no to, but it has to be the right place in the right time. It's just that right now, I'm not sure that it, but I am open to the opportunities. I have open-minded in that regards. But bottom line, whatever I decide to do in the future, I want to have some kind of outreach component to it. I want to be able to share what I do with students younger than me, that grew up similar to me, that had, what's it called, paper-clipped cable. Okay? I want to have that in my life, in whatever career I decide. Bottom line, that's what I want to do. And part of why I'm doing this. And very thankful that out of nowhere, out of the blue, you're like, hey, I have a business proposal for you. And it didn't take me very long to say yes, I think.
Hell, that was like quick as hell. I was like, Eli gonna be like, let me think about it. Let me get back to you. He's like, hell yeah,
let's go.
Let's do it. But no, I was really glad and stoked that I was really excited that you were on board. And I know you. I'm not surprised at all that you have a mission and a desire to like have an outreach component and be an example for others. And I think that's why we're both in agreement and alignment about this podcast. And I say it all the time, man. I'm glad and thankful that you're doing this with me. I look forward to like impacting people. So let's do it, man. But real quick, do you have any homework you want to share? Any scholarship, any resources?
Okay.
I got. Yeah, man. I'm gonna catch you off guard, man.
Okay, no, I'm glad because I was like, if there's one thing I need to do for homework, I need to get one resource. Okay, so in San Antonio, there is a resource here called cafecollege.org. That's CAFE college.org, and is a nonprofit organization that provides advising assistance to high school students. There are also scholarship opportunities. There are webinars on time management and topics related to that. So you just go to Cafe College. It's something that Julian Castro, former mayor of San Antonio, initiated back when he was mayor. It's still a thing. It's a not well-known resource as far as I know, but it's there for students. So you're more than welcome to check it out if you're interested. If you live in the San Antonio area or are interested in a school in the San Antonio area, I definitely recommend everyone to do that. Because I think one thing we talked about, Andrew, is the lack of advising for students. And that's something, I mean, we talked about it a little bit off camera, but that's something that is sorely needed. So anyway, so that's my little resource to share.
This is dope. I'm glad you did your homework. I never heard of this.
Did you go to it? Are you looking at it now?
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. They got a list of scholarships and other scholarship websites you can look at. So, I mean, yeah, you guys should definitely check this out. Cafecollege.org. That's my first time hearing about it, but it looks pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's San Antonio specific, so I'm not sure if it's nationwide, the resources, but like I said, it never hurts to ask. They have a phone
Yeah.
number and an email listed.
So that concludes everything that I had. Again, thanks again, Eli, for coming on board, sharing your story. I think it will benefit a lot of people. I think it'll impact a lot of people. So thanks again for doing that. I look forward to making future podcast episodes with you. And again, my name is Andrew Baines, and this is, or let me back up. We're still working on the outro. This has been another episode of Custom Journeys. And my name is Andrew Baines.
This is Eliseo Iglesias.
And we'll catch y'all later.
Peace.
Out.